So thank you for the invitation to speak with this group today. It's a great honor to be here with you today to address this esteemed audience at the Kyiv Security Forum, particularly as this event comes on the 31st anniversary of the national referendum that confirmed Ukraine's independence, territorial integrity, and the inviolability of its borders. On that day, the Ukrainian people made their voices heard around the world. And today, we again hear your calls for freedom and liberty. And we see your heroism and patriotism as you defend your homeland against Russia's barbaric and criminal invasion. So this anniversary is an inspiration to us all. Russia is threatening the world with hunger, darkness, and further instability. But they will not succeed. NATO will stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes in defending itself, as is Ukraine's right under the UN Charter, a charter that Moscow is trying to lay waste to and violating. But we must remember that Russia's aggression is driven by Putin's desire to wholly remake the European security order, returning to the Cold War days of spheres of influence and abandoning post-war norms regarding sovereignty and self-determination. Now he is conducting a so-called war of exhaustion against Ukraine. Barbaric attacks on civilians and critical infrastructure, as he tries to leave millions of innocent Ukrainians to freeze to death in the cold and dark winter. Meanwhile, he continues with his dangerous nuclear saber rattling, jeopardizing global security and attempting to intimidate Ukraine's supporters in order to weaken our resolve to help Ukraine. However, Putin has made several major strategic mistakes. First, it's clear he misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people, their bravery, and their will to fight to defend their country, defying seemingly all odds. Second, he underestimated the unity, resolve, and dedication of NATO's allies and NATO's partners to support Ukraine. He has also underplayed the economic consequences of the sanctions regime against Russia and overestimated the ability of rapid victory. We've seen that Russian soldiers are short of weapons and short of morale, that they're being abused, sabotaging their own equipment, and even summarily executed for refusing to carry out orders. Underlying all of this has clearly been a massive failure of the Russian intelligence services, which are beset by corruption and incompetence, while Kremlin advisors are too afraid to give Putin honest information that contradicts his own ambitions. So while Putin thought he could defeat the Ukrainian army within only a few days, 9 months later, he continues to face setbacks on a daily basis. Ukrainians bravely continue fighting, liberating territory from the grips of Russian occupiers, and freeing one settlement after another, culminating in the recent liberation of Kherson. Even so, we should not underestimate Russia. Moscow still retains significant military capabilities and can deploy large numbers of troops. But what makes Russia dangerous is its complete disregard for the human costs of war, both to Ukraine and to itself. We see that Russia is willing to inflict horrific suffering on the Ukrainian people, as exemplified by the recent drone and missile strikes against Ukrainian cities, civilians, and critical infrastructure. And now it is also dehumanizing Ukrainians writ large in propaganda. Clearly, Moscow plays by a different set of moral and legal rules. The ongoing widespread and brutal Russian airstrikes against your infrastructure are hitting targets with little or no military purpose. Although Ukraine is admirably defending against many of these attacks, the damage to the electric grid and water supply is serious, directly harming the civilian population. To perform these strikes, Moscow has been drawing deeply upon its reserves of precision munitions and conventional cruise missiles, striking targets throughout your nation. It's clear that the degradation of Ukraine's national infrastructure is now a centerpiece of Russia's strategic approach to the campaign, and the damage has been severe. The costs of rebuilding the country now may be astronomical, with the most recent World Bank estimate putting the price tag at least $350 billion US. And this was even before the waves of airstrikes began in the manner in which they have this fall. But these attacks also underscore Russia's military weaknesses, as Russia is failing to make progress or to maintain momentum in Ukraine, and are, in fact, losing ground, unable to thwart your advances. Such indiscriminate airstrikes on Ukrainian cities, targeting civilians and critical infrastructure, frankly reek of desperation. And as I said, this war of exhaustion will not succeed and may even, in fact, be having the opposite effect, fueling further Ukrainian anger and making concessions from Kyiv even less likely. It's clear now that the inevitable Russian military victory that the Kremlin's propaganda machine spouted is a fantasy. Ukraine's courageous actions on the battlefield and in cyberspace are turning the tide. We know, and Russian commanders on the ground know, that their supplies and munitions are running out. Morale is poor in many parts of the Russian military, and its army is significantly degraded. The human toll of this war on Russian forces is almost incalculable, now and in the future. There continues to be a stark disconnect between operational effectiveness and actually making progress towards the strategic outcomes that the Kremlin envisions. But there can be no lasting peace if Russia wins. There can be no lasting peace if oppression and autocracy prevail over freedom and over democracy. Because then the lesson learned by Putin and other authoritarian leaders will be that they can achieve their goals by using brute force. So they will be emboldened to use even more force next time, making our world that much more dangerous and all of us that much more vulnerable. We know that most wars end at the negotiating table, but what happens at the negotiating table is inextricably linked to what happens on the battlefield first. Therefore, to create the conditions for lasting peace, which ensures that Ukraine prevails as an independent sovereign state, it is in our own long-term security interest to continue to provide military support to Ukraine, as NATO foreign ministers made clear just yesterday in Bucharest. Allies announced several new commitments, including additional air defenses and additional contributions to NATO's comprehensive assistance package, such as fuel, generators, and even more power grid equipment. And they made clear throughout the meeting that they're ready to sustain the support with advanced military equipment, ammunition, fuel, and whatever else might be needed. Yes, support comes at a price, but these are tough times for many around the world with rising costs of living, food, and energy prices. But the price that we pay is in money, while the price that you're paying is in blood. There can be no lasting peace if Russia wins. There can be no lasting peace if oppression and autocracy prevail over freedom and democracy, because then the lesson learned by Putin and other authoritarians, again, is that they can achieve their goals through brute force. So I say, finally, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today.